failure kills 30 COVID patients at Mulago. Some of the challenges facing the East African country in terms of managing what is believed to be yet another wave of the coronavirus pandemic in the country. And of course, other stories covered on the page. Zambia's founding president, Kaunda, dies at 97. That's according to reports that we received yesterday evening from that particular country. And of course, we do join Zambia in mourning their founding father. Uganda short on oxygen by half. That's according to the latest statistics, as hospitals are grappling with this particular challenge in terms of offering services, health services to the COVID patients. Health workers at risk as hospitals run out of PPEs. At least 2,299 health workers have tested positive to COVID-19 since the first case was reported in that particular country. More details on the Daily Monitor. Make sure you're adequately informed. Shifting focus, let's take a look at yet another page. The East African this time round. AU team to probe the Tigray atrocities. Bearing in mind, Ethiopia is just set to enter an election. I think next week, the African Union will definitely play a key role, even as reports of human rights violations emerged from that particular region. Zambia's former president, of course, making headlines right now following his demise. Thus, some of the stories covered on the East African. Let's cross over to Rwanda today. What's happening in that country? And of course, that particular story where we covered on the Tigray atrocities, also making headlines on Rwanda today, even as Africa is yet to meet the Maputo agriculture targets. Facebook beefs up tools for keeping group chats civil. And Uganda DRC Commission road projects linking the country. Some of the headlines right there, just going through. Make sure you're adequately informed even as you get to kickstart your day. Yet another page. Let's see what's transpiring in over the CNN World News. Some of the stories making headlines. And of course, that particular one right there, even as the IDF strikes Gaza for the second time this week after incendiary balloons spark 8 fires in southern Israel. More developments from around the world, around Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Kenneth Kaunda, of course, making headlines, the charismatic first president of Zambia, who passed on at 97 years of age. So that's the latest on the international scene. Let's cross over to the locals. And of course, I'll kickstart with taking a look at what has been covered on Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, on the front page. It's all about the pay freeze for civil servants and teachers. And the cash crunch is definitely biting, as civil servants and teachers become the first victims of a lending program that Kenya entered with the IMF amid an economic slump blamed on COVID-19 after they are denied a pay increase for the next 2 years. That was according to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. And it won't be all smiles for the civil servants, but this is all due to the economic challenge we're facing as a country right now. The commission was expected to undertake a review for pay of government employees this year as part of the exercise it undertakes every 4 years. So that's on the front page of The Standard, even as they cover other stories. Tough new COVID rules for hotspots, even as the Ministry of Health came up with guidelines where 13 pandemic hotspots counties in Nyanza, Western, and some parts of Rift Valley have actually been slapped with tough new rules, including a 7 p.m. curfew to curb the surge in coronavirus infections. The positivity rate has been off the roof in these particular counties, and this was a reaction to that. Let's hope the preparation in terms of catering to those who are affected will definitely be high as well. Allow me to introduce our panelists joining us in studio to help us deliberate on these matters and more. Professor Gitile Naituli, former NCIC Commissioner and definitely a regular face on the panel. A very good morning to you.
To you and morning to your viewers.
Well, it's great to have you. Gloria Roba, it's great to have you this Friday, Youth Policy Analyst.
Good morning, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
Great. We're also joined by way of Zoom, Kasim Tandaza, Member of Parliament, Matuga constituency. I don't know if it's morning, but good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jesse. Good morning, our viewers and my fellow panelists.
Okay, great to have you. So let's react with the front page of the Standard. The pay freeze that is affecting civil servants and teachers, of course, due to the obligations we find ourselves paying as a country due to the deal we got in with the IMF. Prof, your quick reaction to this?
I think things don't get a lot worse before they get better.
As simple as that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we should expect more rain before the sunshine comes. Okay. Well, we'll definitely get more details on this. Gloria Ruoba, I mean, it's a tough time to be as a civil servant right now. For loans that will advance through the IMF conditions, well, they're coming back to haunt us. Well, what say you about this?
I think it's a tough time to be in Kenya in general, whether as a civil servant or in the corporate world, in the NGO world. I think maybe for the civil servants, they've actually been buffered or protected throughout this pandemic. And, you know, we don't have money, Jesse. We don't have enough money even to run this government. So they are just going through what some of us have been going through since the pandemic started. Okay. And actually, we should be thankful if you are in civil service that you still have a job, because a majority of Kenyans actually lost their jobs. You know, a lot of businesses closed. So the fact that they have their jobs and the only thing we're talking about is salary increments or negotiations, then they should count their blessings, because in the corporate world, in the NGO world, in this other side, it's tough. It's really tough.
Quite so. It's a tough time economically right now. As the Standard says, many working in the private sector lost their jobs, while most of those who are retained are grappling with reduced salaries. But this is just the start, as Professor hinted. The Standard mentions, beside freezing hiring and payments, the number of fledgling parastatals will also be restructured in what is likely to result in job losses reminiscent to the 1990s style structure that happened then due to the adjustment programs. Kasim Tandaza, what say you about this?
Well, I totally hold a different view, Jesse, and our viewers. One, I actually don't know how they're going to do that, even the current laws. I'm not aware of any amendment in the labor laws before the National Assembly, for that matter. You cannot reduce somebody's salary. You can only increase it. At worst, maybe you can somehow temper around with the increment at worst. You can probably temper around with some allowances. You can curtail some, if one had some privileges of tea and coffee and travel from second class, from first class to third class. But with salaries, I don't think it would help. Two, I don't think the salaries in the civil service are high anyway. And I would totally hold a different view. I've never been in the civil service, for that matter. I want to put it on record. I've been working in what we call the Juakali sector. But from what I've been seeing with my colleagues, unless one actually has either some side job somewhere, or he's in a position where now he engaged in some unethical activities to gain extra money. If you were to do life audits of civil servants with their salaries they've been earning over time and what they can actually do, you find that they barely earn living wages. And probably it should not be a reason for one to engage in corruption, but for sure, most civil servants, if the lifestyle audit was done, you would see that the salary that they're earning certainly cannot even allow them to buy a plot in Kitengela. And now, saying that you are going to reduce their salaries, to me, I think it's not going to work that way. And I even doubt if it's going to save money. On the issue of recruitment, yet, it's also a very big problem right now. I remember right now in my county, basically, we don't have engineers at the county level from the national government. That means most government projects are suffering. And they stopped hiring. People have been dying. They've been retiring. They've stopped hiring. So there could be some sectors where, of course, there is overemployment. But currently, there are some sectors also in the civil service which need serious people to be holding those positions. So I'm not quite sure. Probably it's just on paper, but when it comes to implementation, I'm yet to see how it's going to go, Jesse.
Well, it's a tough place we find ourselves as a country because according to SRC, they were in consultation with the Treasury when they came to this particular stand, and they noted that the government was stretched and could not afford to handle an increase in the public sector wage bill. The wage bill definitely coming into sharp focus even as we look for ways to sort of cut back on government expenditure. More details on page 6 right there. Let's cross over to something that developed just yesterday, and it's all to do with the new COVID measures for Nyanza and Western region as the positivity cases have actually risen. And data from the Kisumu County government, according to the Standard, indicates that about 80 to 90% of the COVID-19 patients are infected with the deadly Delta variant, which was first detected in India. Let's take a look at this report before we get the sentiments from our panelists.
For the past few weeks, counties in Nyanza, Western and parts of the Rift Valley have been recording an alarming number of COVID cases, a move that has prompted governments to declare the region a COVID-19 hotspot. According to the Ministry of Health, the Lake Basin region has cumulatively accounted for about 60% of the COVID-19 caseload, with a positivity rate of 21%, compared to a national average of 9%. The 13 counties to be affected by the new measures are Busia, Vihiga, Kisii, Nyamira, Kakamega, Bungoma, Kericho, Bomet, Trans Nzoia, Kisumu, Siaya, Homa Bay and Migori. Alongside the partial lockdown will be a daily 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew. Only essential and emergency service providers will be allowed movement between the red zone and the rest of the country. All cross-border cargo drivers will be required to possess a valid certificate indicating a negative COVID-19 test conducted not more than 48 hours before commencing their journey. The weekly non-food and livestock markets within the red zone have also been banned for 30 days, with all public gatherings and interperson meetings of whatever nature, including house parties, sporting activities, church and religious activities, indefinitely prohibited within the red zone. All funeral and burial ceremonies in the affected counties are to be conducted within 72 hours of confirmation of death, with night vigils and overnight processions prior to funerals prohibited. The attendance of funerals within the red zone are capped at 50 people, while attendees, officiators and facilitators of wedding ceremonies or traditional unions, rites of passage and similar ceremonies should not exceed 30 persons. The rest of the country will remain on the 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News.
And that's the latest in terms of those particular counties that have been affected. Gloria, Kisii County is among them, and I'm sure this is a sigh of relief due to the increase in positivity cases. Your reaction to this?
I think this country is very, very unfair to poor people because when you look at the zones that have been declared, you know, the hotspots of COVID and things like that, we just had a very big celebration in Kisumu the other day, and people questioned and said, why do we have to do this at a time when we have this pandemic? And actually that caused the spike that we are seeing right now. So for the elite, for those what we call dynasties, they went, they did their celebrations, they had their, you know, the hype, whatever it is they were trying to achieve with that whole gathering in Kisumu, and then at the end of the day you cause this spike in infections, and then you tell poor people who've been struggling to even just go out and survive a day to earn $1, that now actually we are going to cut your hours of earning an income. That now actually, because of what we could have avoided by running a virtual celebration in 2000 and when we had the pandemic. So if we're in 21, that was in 19. We had virtual celebrations of the same event. So why was it such a necessity for people to tell us, you know, now Uhuru Kenyatta is going to Kisumu to show that, you know, the handshake is working, whatever nonsense that was. And it's very unfair that now it is the poor people who are having to deal with being locked down, running through the curfews, and all, you know, the effects of all the measures that have been put. And this is what I think. The worst thing about this is those who are participating on that Kisumu event, most of them have been vaccinated. If you ask me, most of them have actually gotten their second jab. The people who are now being locked down in their houses, the people in Kisii who are now being forced not to trade for longer hours and earn an income, those people are not vaccinated. So this is what I'm saying. This country is very, very unfair to poor people. And at the end of the day, this is when I hear people talking about we must look at whether the economy or the socioeconomic status or whatever from the bottom up, this is exactly what we are talking about. That in situations like this, we ask ourselves, must we go to Kisumu to show the handshake project, to cut ribbons, because as we have been vaccinated as leaders, as we have been, we are privileged enough to be isolated in our big 4 cars and whatever. But then at the end of the day, the people who we are living there don't have vaccinations. They don't have that privilege to say that we can social distance or whatever it is. I'm just upset. This country is this government is very unfair to poor people.
Okay, but it's a tough balance between lives and livelihoods. Now that we're here, and we get your point, the government, in one hand, is to blame due to the event that occurred.
To be specific, our president.
Okay.
Yes.
So now, it's a tough balance between life and livelihoods. What do you make of the tough conditions that have been put down? Because on one side, you definitely have to look at the lives, and on the other side, the economic implications are definitely bad.
What I think is, though the lives that we are looking at, again, the people who we are trying to, we are claiming that we are trying to protect, again, are the poor. We should have thought about that before we said we are going to launch projects. And right now, we are in a situation that we could have totally avoided. By the way, for the longest time, Kisii's numbers have been very down. Actually, if you look at the list of the what they're calling now the hotspot zones, their numbers have been very down until this Kisumu affair. So if you ask me, it's like I go out of my way to create a problem, and then I come in and say, I care so much about you that I'm going to solve it by punishing you. So I think, if you ask me, first of all the hotspot zones that have been put on that list, can we see the same government that took events to go and launch handshake projects to now take the vaccinations to those hotspot zones and says, now, okay, it was our fault, we brought the spike in infections, so what we are going to do, we are going to stop these vaccinations on these other places which are not on the hotspot zone, and we are going to take the vaccinations on those places. And then can we see the same government that brought the problem saying that since we don't want you to go, particularly in Kisii, to the markets or church or whatever, what we are going to do, we are going to now get into this budget that we have here for emergency, and we are going to give you some sort of buffer, since now we are restricting you from earning an income.
Okay, so Prof, let me bring you in. Speaking of solutions, the vaccination drive in the country is set to be the silver lining to actually get us from the effects of this pandemic. But looking at reports throughout this week, messages have been sent to some health workers, come for your second vaccination, you get to Mbagathi Hospital, line up, and there's no vaccine at the end of the day. You're told to go back home. What do you say about the state of preparation right now in Kenya?
I think the vaccination program is suffering the same financial constraints that the society is going through, or the government is going through. So you can see all the arrangements being made, bring AstraZeneca vaccine, bring Johnson & Johnson. I think in the budget there is about 14 billion now, for 10 billion, I think, if I remember well, for buying the vaccines. So the government is facing a very tough situation, actually. And I like the passion of my colleague here. I think she should run for some office.
I'm running for member of parliament in
She is very passionate. Yes. We are facing challenges. I think the government is probably doing the best that they can do under the circumstances.
But our priorities, right? I think that would be
yeah, we are getting the priority right now. I guess the BMBI is out of the way, so we are concentrating on vaccine and other things because I didn't see the money in the budget for that, but I've seen the money for vaccine. So we are beginning to think correctly. People need to be vaccinated. The vaccine works. We have seen in countries where they are vaccinated over 55%, like Israel, the life have basically literally gone to normal, or even the UK, well. And there are a lot of areas in the US and France. Yeah. So these vaccines are working, and I think the government needs to really pay serious attention and supply enough so that we can immunize the society against this disease.
Okay, well noted.
Yes, the measures being taken in Western Kenya, I think they are necessary measures. You see, right now, regardless of what brought it, we need to control it.
As simple as that.
Yes.
Okay. Kasim Tandaza, I mean, as you react to this, health is a devolved function. The counties right now are reeling from the effects of not having money. Treasury did give a promise, an ultimatum, they'll release money by the end of this week. But this is a scenario we found ourselves time and time again. What say you about this whole debacle?
Well, I'll just pick it up from what Professor has just said, that in most cases, the government, I think deliberately decides to get it wrong, because there are some of the things which anybody from whichever angle can say that this should be the priority at this time. But we find in many cases that the priorities are not prioritized, in a matter of fact. And I think there lies the problem. I don't think at any one time this country will have enough money to do everything. I don't think, even at my household as a leader, as a member of parliament, or another person, probably very few in this country would have all the money that they will need to do everything anytime. So it's a question at any time to get your priorities right, and that is where we actually fail. We could have allocated some monies to the Ministry of Health. Certainly it can't be enough. It requires a priority from that ministry. It requires prudent use of the few resources. It requires a prudent utilization in matters of procurement, in matters distribution, in matters storage, and we find that lacking. So that's where the problem is. Otherwise, to me, when it comes to matters COVID, the treatment is actually free. To keep it away, it is actually free. It doesn't cost you anything. Probably a face mask. Now, a face mask has gone to as low as 10 shillings, So despite, I'm also left with the fact that probably a majority of Kenyans may not be able to afford that. But surely if it comes to matters health, and even that individual prioritizes his or her health, then it requires the mask. Social distancing is free. Unnecessary travel saves you money. And the other functions that we normally have. And this is where the tragedy is. We could be singling out the Kisumu function, which we had all said that it had the potential of spiking this COVID. But for sure, the general public, from where I sit, and let's be honest, as leaders, or even you as a person, I'm sure you have seen weddings happening, breaking the COVID rules. You have seen burials happening, breaking the COVID rules. You have seen all manner of gatherings, even in our social status, in markets, even on the road and anywhere. The masks we have, the majorities, and currently the police is like they've given up. Of course, I don't think that will be the solution of picking everybody and taking him to the cells right now, because if the police were to conduct a swoop anywhere in this country, I think they will need a train to take those people now to the police station. But to me, I think the government should invest more in managing in terms of enforcing now the COVID regulations, because that is where it's actually failing. Not from the politicians only, we are failing, but largely from everybody in Kenya. And yet, I insist, essentially, the treatment for COVID should be free. We've spent all that money trying to vaccinate 1 million people. We can spend the next allocation vaccinating another 1 million people. But remember, if I'm to quote the expert right, we need at least 30% of the population, at least 50% of the population. I don't think we'll reach there within this year. So can we go to basics, Lucy?
Asim, and of course, a lot of emphasis to be put on mass vaccination. Gloria, as we conclude, I mean, the enforcement part, the law, the curfew has been there, especially in Nairobi and these other counties, but the enforcement has been lackluster, sort of, especially with the curfew. Talk to me about what you think needs to be done, because mass vaccination is the way to go. Do you foresee a state where we can actually stop some development projects to focus on vaccinating the population?
I mean, at this point, if you ask someone who has a degree or otherwise, should we build a road or should we vaccinate people so that they don't die? If you ask someone, should we now start doing groundbreaking for some processing plants in Lamu, or should we vaccinate someone? So, I mean, it's common sense. We should focus all our efforts on vaccination. But having measures, having lockdowns, having curfews, without necessarily having an end game. You know, you normally tell people, just assuming that you're a parent, you say, you know, amtatoka nje because I need all the chores in the house finished. Then when they are finished, everybody can go outside and play. Yeah? So now the government is telling us, amtatoka nje, lakini we don't know for how long. And we don't know at what point we'll be okay with you going outside. And we don't know if we will be able to facilitate that process of actually getting you vaccinated so that now you can go back to operating as usual. So it is like people are trying to tell us that it is for your safety, it is for your week. We are concerned about you as government. If you are concerned about me as a Kenyan citizen, and you are actually trying to tell me that we want to reach a place where everybody is going to be safe, the only thing I should be seeing on the news for the next couple of weeks should be, you know, announcements. If you live in this region, there's this and that. Now we vaccinated this many people. I should not be seeing numbers of how many people have died of COVID. What I should be seeing is, by the way, in this county, in this constituency, we have now vaccinated this many people. We are now having one more week, and the next drive is going to move to this constituency. Those are the figures that the Ministry of Health should be giving us, not how many people have died and which are the hotspot zones. It's what are you actually doing as a government? Yes.
All right, well noted. And just bearing in mind the 13 counties that have been given new restrictions actually contributed to 60% of the national caseload and 21% of the positivity rate against a national 9% positivity rate. More details on page 7 of the Standard. Make sure you grab yourself a copy. But Prof, something that's linked with this, health is a devolved unit, and when we have governors, especially the COG chair, the Embu Governor Wambora, mentioning that it might not be a case of goodwill from the national government, from the Treasury, in terms of release of funds in a timely manner. What do you read of this?
You know, when the money has been voted by Parliament for the counties, the money needs to go to the counties because it has been voted by Parliament. It's law. You see, every year Parliament passes 2 pieces of legislation. What is called development expenditure as a law, as a legislation, and also recurrent expenditure. So you have 2 bills which become law, recurrent and development. I think the Treasury should not be holding that money if it has it. The problem is the Treasury may not be having that money. Remember, we have mismanaged ourselves here for quite a while now, and the chickens are coming home to roost. We need serious financial discipline. Serious financial discipline. And we don't have financial discipline. When money can be spent contrary to the law, because you can't spend money that has not been budgeted, approved by Parliament. You cannot spend money outside the budgeted process. But we do. And then we go back to Parliament, and Parliament rectifies that after it has happened. That financial indiscipline is what is causing problems that we are seeing now nationally. We need to stick to financial discipline, because that the money the counties are asking is money already budgeted for them. Of course, personally, I've always thought that that was the wrong thing we did. We don't have to give the counties any money. The counties are supposed to identify development projects and the national government fund them. Because what happens is the counties become employment bureaus, and those employment are usually their relatives and the people close to all this political establishment within the counties. And that is causing strain. You see, we have enough employment. Look here, the national government has a sub-chief in the county, in the sub-chief, chief in the county. Those people are what they call county administrators.
Okay.
This is double positions that people don't need. We expanded the employment and giving truth to the people who think that Africa is unlikely to take off because our primary industry is employment, which is consumption. It's not production. And so, as long as we continue in that direction, we can't solve anything. What we need is to have employment that actually produces something.
Okay.
And that is what we have not been able to do. We think administration is an industry that is giving back to society. It doesn't.
Let me ask you this now. Own source revenue from the counties, there have been proposals being thrown around that perhaps direct spending should be a thing we can look at right now going forward when it comes to counties. Well, what's your take on that, Prof?
What do we mean by direct spending? You see, when it comes to counties, for example, all the employment within the county should be left to the local resources, okay? So that the national resources can go to what is separated as, that is the development. So it goes to health, for example, it goes to education, for instance. Then it goes to infrastructure, national development money. So we need to retool. Sometimes I don't know how the BBI actually lost that. We need to redefine what it is that we fund at the counties so these people are able to invest, they are able to source for money themselves, they are able to create local industries, because you see, money can never be enough. You can never have enough money.
Okay.
Money needs to follow functions. As it is right now, we just allocate. And then those fellows will go there, do whatever they want to do with the money. Even the accountability itself, as you saw with the COVID money, is actually not there. And the accountability is crucial when you are going to deal with the finances.
Okay. Well noted. Kasim Tandaza, briefly, because this issue on counties and monies allocated has also put sharp focus on Parliament and its role on oversight. And how do you react as a parliamentarian when you hear talk of an emasculated Parliament?
There is a problem when it comes to certainly the counties and the national government. Initially, there was a talk that probably the executive was not really bought into the idea of devolved units. They were really not happy with the idea that, well, it was passed in a referendum, it became law, but somehow the executive was not comfortable and hence trying to stifle their operations, trying to show that they actually can't work. We are also having a problem as parliamentarians, so to speak, almost now less than 2 weeks to the end of this financial year 2020-2021. Monies which are meant to have been dispersed to the constituencies have not been dispersed up to now. Treasury has not been able to do it. Well, whether it's a question of not having enough money, that could be understood, or whether it's a question of probably not being very comfortable with the whole process, that is another concern. But for sure, monies which are supposed to be dispersed to the county government, to me, as a strong supporter of devolved units, this should be a priority. And it's a priority because they have been given very, very crucial dockets to handle, like the issue of health. Well, the national government will be handling level 6, 5, and such hospitals. In my county, we don't have such hospitals. So essentially, all the health care system, the whole system of health in Kwale County is handled by the devolved units. Now, if no monies are released in time, and on this period where we are saying we also want to find pandemic, and these people basically in the counties, they are not at the national the national government, then it is a problem. And that is why we are seeing this pull and push. When it comes to budgetary allocations in the judiciary, we always also get some challenges. So it all boils down to what we had initially said, that this government, or any other government for that matter, should be prioritizing where it hurts most, where the ordinary mwananchi is hurt most. And I think that is where the government, in most cases, gets it wrong.
Okay,
of course, there are the other challenges. There are the other challenges that even when the money now is taken to the counties, it could be misused. But for the fact, that is another problem of the other government agencies also not acting. Because if the other government agencies are acting as it should be, then we should be seeing that whoever misuses some fund, some action is taken, and that will deter the next person taking that route. But that is also not happening. So it's a question of the Kenya we want versus the Kenya we have. But to me, I think going forward, everybody needs to play his part. From the executive, the county governments, once they get those monies, from the the legislature in terms of appropriation, to also try to appropriate where it is needed most, and finally the prudent use of the little resources that we have.
Okay, well noted, Tandaza. Prof?
In all honesty, the financial challenges that this country faces will be sorted out when we start, the people in charge of this country start using public money, not the way you use personal money.
As simple as that. Well, at least we've gotten to the end of that particular conversation. Gloria, even as we're talking about that, the business on the Standard mentions that the Treasury is eyeing to raise 108 billion from a fourth Euro bond. Well, tough times we're living in. Allow us to take a short break. When we come back, we will continue with the discussion. Something that has been